Natalie Chen stood in the empty ballroom of the Riverside Manor, her camera bag slung over one shoulder and a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden patterns across polished marble floors. She had photographed 37 weddings in the past 2 years, yet each one still felt like walking through a museum of her own shattered hopes. 2 years ago, she'd been the bride-to-be. The venue had been booked, the dress altered, the invitations mailed. Then Michael had confessed 3 weeks before the ceremony that he had fallen in love with someone else. Someone who wanted the same things he wanted, he had explained, as if Natalie's dreams of building a photography business instead of becoming a corporate lawyer made her somehow deficient. "Stop dwelling on ancient history," she muttered to herself, unpacking her equipment. The familiar ritual calmed her nerves. Adjust the lens, check the battery, test the flash. Photography had saved her after the breakup. Behind the camera, she could capture love without having to believe in it for herself. Sophie Martinez, her best friend since elementary school, deserved perfect wedding photos. That meant Natalie needed to focus on the job, not on the hollow feeling that always emerged when she watched other people promise forever. The ballroom doors burst open with a crash that made Natalie jump. A small tornado in the form of a 6-year-old boy raced through, cape flying behind him like a superhero in flight. "Tommy, slow down," a deep male voice called from the hallway. "We talked about using our inside manners." The boy skidded to a stop directly in front of Natalie's tripod, nearly toppling her most expensive camera. She lunged forward, catching it just in time.
"Whoa there, speed racer," she said, steadying the equipment.
That was almost a very expensive crash landing. Looked up at her with enormous brown eyes, full of wonder rather than apology. "Are you a princess? You look like one, with all that sparkly stuff on your camera?" Natalie glanced down at the decorative camera strap Rachel had given her for Christmas, covered in tiny crystals that caught the light. Not a princess, just a photographer who likes shiny things. Tommy Sullivan, what did I say about running? Ahead, the man from the hallway appeared, slightly out of breath. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like it had been hastily combed and a suit jacket draped over one arm. His tie hung loose around his neck, unknotted. "I am so sorry. Did he damage anything?" Natalie found herself staring longer than professionally. Appropriate. The man had the kind of face that belonged in front of her camera rather than behind it. Strong jawline, kind eyes, and an expression of harried exhaustion that every single parent wore like a badge of honor. Everything survived, she managed, adjusting her camera to give her hands something to do. "Your son just has enthusiasm for life. That's a diplomatic way of putting it." He extended his hand. "James Sullivan, distant cousin of the groom. Very distant, which is why we were invited but not given any actual responsibilities, thank goodness. Natalie Chen, photographer and best friend of the bride. Very close. Which is why I'm here at 7 in the morning setting up." She shook his hand, noting calluses that suggested he worked with his hands despite the expensive watch on his wrist. Tommy tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, can I help the princess?" "She has cool cameras." "I'm really not a princess," Natalie told him gently. "But you could be," Tommy insisted, "with the absolute certainty of childhood. You just need the right story." James's expression softened as he looked at his son. "The kid reads too many fairy tales. His grandmother keeps buying him books about princes and happy endings." "Nothing wrong with happy endings," Natalie said, surprising herself with the defensive tone. "Even if they're just in stories?" Something flickered across James's face. Recognition, maybe? Or shared understanding? Sound like someone who's given up on them in real life. Before Natalie could respond, Victor Torres swept into the ballroom like a theatrical hurricane. The wedding planner wore a purple suit that should have been ridiculous but somehow worked perfectly on him. "Natalie, darling, we have a crisis," he announced, then noticed James and Tommy. "Oh, hello, handsome stranger, an adorable miniature human. I'm Victor, the genius who's making sure this wedding doesn't dissolve into chaos. Who might you be?" The distant cousin, hoping not to get drafted into crisis management, James replied with a slight smile. "Too late, gorgeous. I need tall people." Victor grabbed James's arm. The florist delivered 8-foot arrangements instead of 6-foot arrangements. They're blocking the ceremonial arch. I need someone with height and muscles to help move them. Dad has lots of muscles, Tommy volunteered proudly. He builds buildings. An architect who's also tall and strong. Sophie really should have seated. You at the singles table. Victor winked at Natalie. I'll return your new friend in 20 minutes. Try not to miss him too much. James shot Natalie an apologetic look as Victor dragged him toward the ceremony space. Tommy remained behind, circling Natalie's equipment with intense curiosity. Can I stay with you? He asked. Dad takes forever when people make him move stuff, and you seem nice. Natalie should have said no. She had work to do, lighting to test, angles to plan. But something about Tommy's hopeful expression reminded her of Rachel at that age, before life taught her that not all wishes came true. Sure, she heard herself say, but you have to be my assistant. That means following directions and being very careful around expensive equipment. Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. I'll be the best assistant ever. What do I do first? Art of accidental connection for the next hour. Natalie found herself explaining photography basics to an eager 6-year-old while setting up for the ceremony. Tommy absorbed information like a sponge, asking surprisingly thoughtful questions about light and shadow and why certain angles made people look happy. My dad looks happy when he's drawing buildings, Tommy confided as Natalie adjusted a reflector. But he looks sad when he thinks I'm not watching. He misses Mom, but he won't say it. Natalie's hand stilled on the equipment. Where's your mom? Tommy. Heaven. The word came out matter of fact, the way children delivered devastating truths. She got sick when I was 4. Grandma Eleanor says she's watching us from above, making sure we eat our vegetables and brush our teeth. The knot in Natalie's chest tightened for entirely different reasons. I'm sorry, sweetheart. That must be really hard. Tommy shrugged with practiced resilience. Dad says everyone has hard things. Ours is just missing Mom. What's yours? The question caught her completely off guard. Children had no filter, no social awareness of what questions were too personal. And somehow that honesty felt refreshing after 2 years of people tiptoeing around her failed engagement. I thought I was going to marry someone, Natalie said, slowly, testing how it felt to speak the truth out loud. But it turned out we wanted different things. So now I take pictures of other people's weddings instead of having my own. That's sad, Tommy declared with absolute sincerity. But Dad says when one story ends, another one's waiting to start. Maybe your new story is hiding somewhere and you just haven't found it yet. Before Natalie could respond to that unexpected wisdom, James returned, carrying 2 massive flower arrangements. His tie remained unknotted, his jacket still draped over one arm, and his hair looked even more disheveled than before. Victor is a force of nature disguised as a wedding planner, he announced, setting down the flowers carefully. I've been recruited for 7 more tasks before the ceremony even starts. Tommy, have you been behaving? I've been the best assistant, Tommy said proudly. Natalie taught me about cameras and light and how to make people smile without telling them to. Say cheese. It's true. He's a natural. Natalie smiled despite herself. You should be proud. James looked between his son and Natalie, something indefinable crossing his expression. Thank you for keeping him occupied, for not minding his very personal questions. He hasn't quite mastered boundaries yet. Honestly, it was nice. Natalie meant it. Most people at weddings either want to tell me their life story or treat me like I'm invisible. Tommy just wanted to learn. I like her, Dad, Tommy announced with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Da. She should sit with us at dinner. Tommy, he's right, though. The words tumbled out before Natalie could stop them. Not about sitting together, but about dinner. I usually eat alone during receptions, while everyone else dances and celebrates. It gets lonely after a while. James held her gaze for a long moment. Something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. 2 people carrying loss, navigating lives that hadn't turned out how they planned, finding unexpected connection in a ballroom full of other people's happiness. Maybe, James said carefully, we could change that. For tonight, at least. The ceremony began at noon, and Natalie slipped into professional mode, capturing moments with practiced efficiency. But throughout the service, she found herself looking for James and Tommy in the crowd, their faces bright spots in a sea of guests. The reception hall transformed as evening approached. String lights twinkled overhead like captured stars, and centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus filled the air with subtle fragrance. Natalie moved through the crowd with her camera, documenting the carefully orchestrated chaos of celebration. She caught Sophie's radiant smile as David whispered something in her ear, captured the tender moment when his grandmother dabbed tears during the toast, and framed the explosive joy of children racing across the dance floor through her lens. She spotted James sitting at table 12 with Tommy, who was systematically building a fortress from dinner rolls. James looked more relaxed now, his tie finally knotted properly, jacket back on. He was listening intently to an elderly woman Natalie recognized as his grandmother Eleanor, nodding at whatever wisdom she was imparting. "Stop staring at the handsome architect and get back to work." Victor appeared at her elbow, balancing 3 champagne flutes with impressive dexterity. "Although I completely understand the distraction, that man could model for romance novel covers. I'm not staring, I'm observing. There's a professional difference." Natalie adjusted her lens settings to hide her embarrassment. "Sure, darling. I'm not already planning your wedding color scheme." Victor handed her a champagne flute. "Purple. And gold, by the way. It would complement your skin tone beautifully." "Victor, please." Fine. "But for the record, he's been watching you too. Every time you move through the room, his eyes follow. It's quite romantic in a stalkerish kind of way." Victor drifted off to handle some crisis with the cake table, leaving Natalie alone with her camera and her suddenly racing thoughts. The DJ's voice boomed across the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our wedding party dance. Bridesmaids and groomsmen, please make your way to the dance floor." Natalie's stomach dropped.
Ow.
She had forgotten about this tradition. Sophie had insisted that even though Natalie was technically the photographer, she was still the maid of honor and therefore required to participate in at least one official dance. Rachel appeared beside her, grinning wickedly. "You promise, Sophie? No backing out now. I'm working. I have a camera. These are legitimate excuses. I'll hold your camera. Shh, you go dance." Rachel plucked the expensive equipment from Natalie's hands before she could protest. "Sophie will kill me if I let you skip this." 6 bridesmaids were already lined up on the dance floor in their lavender dresses, paired with groomsmen in charcoal suits. Natalie reluctantly joined them, ending up at the far end of the line. The DJ was explaining the dance tradition, something about each pairing taking a turn in the spotlight. Then Victor's voice cut through the microphone. Wait. We're short 1 groomsman because Marcus had that emergency appendectomy yesterday. This won't do. We need balance, people. Balance is essential to wedding aesthetics. Can sit it out." Natalie volunteered hopefully. "Absolutely not. You're the maid of honor." Victor scanned the crowd with predatory efficiency. "We need a volunteer. Someone tall, handsome, who looks good in a suit." His gaze locked onto table 12. "You there, architect cousin? Get up here." James looked up from his conversation with Eleanor, confusion evident on his face. "Me, yes, you. Come rescue our symmetry." Victor gestured dramatically. "Your grandmother agrees." I can see her nodding. Indeed, Eleanor was waving James forward with an encouraging smile. Tommy bounced in his seat, clearly delighted by this development. James stood slowly, shooting Natalie an apologetic look across the room. As he walked toward the dance floor, conversations quieted. He moved with an easy confidence that came from being comfortable in his own skin, not from arrogance. "I should warn you," he said quietly as he took his position beside Natalie, "I'm not a great dancer. My wife used to say I had the rhythm of a refrigerator. Well, I actively avoid dancing at weddings, so we're perfectly matched in our incompetence." Natalie tried to keep her voice light despite her hammering heart. The music started. A slow instrumental version of a classic love song. The first bridesmaid and groomsman pair took their turn in the center, executing a simple waltz. Then the second pair, then the third. "So," James murmured, as they waited their turn. Tommy told me you taught him about finding new stories when old ones end. That was kind of you. He's a special kid. Should be proud. I am, every single day. James's voice held fierce devotion. Being a single parent is terrifying and exhausting, and the best thing I've ever done. How long has it been since your wife passed? 2 years next month? Lymphoma? It happened fast. James's jaw tightened. One day we were planning her birthday party. 6 months later, I was planning her funeral. Tommy barely remembers her now, which kills me. I show him pictures and videos every night, trying to keep her alive in his memory. Natalie's throat constricted. I'm so sorry. That's unimaginably hard. What about you, your broken engagement? Was it recent? 2 years ago as well? Different kind of loss, but still a death of sorts? Death of a future I'd planned. Natalie watched the fourth couple take their turn. He said I wasn't ambitious. Enough that I was throwing away my law degree to play with cameras. Apparently wanting to create art instead of reviewing contracts made me immature. He sounds like an idiot. The bluntness startled a laugh from her. That's what Sophie said, among other more colorful descriptions. Your photography isn't playing. I watched you work today. You see things other people miss? The way you captured that moment when the flower girl stopped halfway down the aisle to wave at her grandmother, that was pure emotion frozen in time. That's not immaturity, that's talent. Before Natalie could respond, Victor's voice announced, and now our final pair is the maid of honor and our heroic volunteer. The moment everything shifted, they stepped into the center of the dance floor, and suddenly 200 guests were watching. Natalie's palms grew sweaty. James placed one hand carefully at her waist, taking her other hand in his. His touch was gentle but sure, respectful of boundaries while still being present. Just follow my lead, he whispered. And if I step on your feet, I apologize in advance. The music swelled around them. James began moving, and to Natalie's surprise, he actually could dance. Not with flashy technique, but with a natural grace that came from truly listening to the music. You lied about the refrigerator rhythm, she accused softly. My wife taught me before she got sick, said every husband should know how to dance with his wife. His voice carried old pain and tender memory. We used to practice in our kitchen after Tommy went to bed. She'd stand on my feet and we'd shuffle around to old records. They turned slowly, and Natalie caught Sophie's face in the crowd. Her best friend was crying, one hand pressed to her mouth. David held her close, his expression equally emotional. Everyone's watching us like we're the main attraction, Natalie murmured. Let them watch. I'm only looking at you anyway. The honesty in his voice made her breath catch. She met his eyes and found something there that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Recognition, not love, not yet, but the acknowledgement that something significant was happening between them. I don't do this, Natalie said urgently. I don't believe in wedding magic or love at first sight or any of that romance novel nonsense. I take pictures of other people's happiness because I gave up on finding my own. I don't either, James replied, pulling her slightly closer as the music built. After my wife died, I decided I was done. Tommy needed stability, not a parade of potential stepmothers who'd eventually leave. I was going to focus on being a good father and building my business and nothing else. So why does this feel different? I have no idea, but it does. They moved together, no longer thinking about steps or rhythm, just flowing with the music and each other. Natalie became aware of details with photographer's precision. The warmth of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of cedar and something citrus from his cologne, the way his thumb unconsciously traced small circles on her palm, the catch in his breath when she looked up at him. From somewhere in the crowd, Tommy's voice rang out with perfect clarity.
It's
Smiling, like really smiling. The way he looks in the old pictures with Mom. Eleanor's response carried just as clearly, hush, child. We're witnessing something important. Victor had somehow acquired the microphone again. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the most cinematically perfect dance of the evening. Someone please tell me we're recording this. Victor, stop narrating our lives, Sophie called out, laughing through tears. But Victor was right. Something about this moment felt suspended in time, like the universe had paused to let them catch up with what was happening. The other wedding. Guests faded into soft focus. The music became background to the conversation happening without words between Natalie and James. "I'm scared," Natalie admitted in a whisper. "What if this is just wedding atmosphere? What if tomorrow we wake up and realize this was just champagne and string lights and romantic music? Then we wake up tomorrow and find out." James's grip tightened slightly. But what if it's not? What if this is the beginning of that new story Tommy talked about? The song was ending. They had maybe 30 seconds left before the spell would break and reality would crash back in. "I live in the city," Natalie said quickly. "I work weekends because that's when weddings happen. I'm still figuring out who I am after my engagement fell apart. Probably need therapy for my commitment issues. I live in the suburbs because of good schools for Tommy. My schedule revolves around his activities and my grandmother's doctor appointments. Haven't been on a real date in 2 years because I spend every evening building Lego sets and reading bedtime stories." James's eyes never left hers. "And I wouldn't change any of that. But I'd like to find room for one more thing. One more person." The music stopped. Applause erupted around them, but neither moved immediately. They stood in the center of the dance floor, hands still linked, both breathing harder than the gentle dance warranted. Tommy broke through the crowd first, launching himself at his father's legs. "Dad, that was amazing. You looked like a prince in those movies Grandma makes me watch." Eleanor followed more sedately, her eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "Natalie, dear, I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Eleanor Sullivan. And I'd very much like to invite you to Sunday dinner this week. We eat at 5. Nothing fancy, just family." Natalie looked between Eleanor's expectant face, Tommy's hopeful expression, and James's carefully neutral one. "I don't want to intrude on family time." "Nonsense. Any friend of James's is welcome." Eleanor's smile suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "Besides, Tommy has been talking about you nonstop since this morning. Apparently you're a princess who teaches magic with cameras." "I really emphasized the not a princess part," Natalie protested weakly. "All the best princesses say that," Tommy informed her solemnly. "It's in the rules." Rachel appeared with Natalie's camera. "I got some amazing shots of that dance. Two looked like the actual bride and groom out there." She studied James with sisterly assessment. "I'm Rachel, the younger sister who vets all potential suitors. What are your intentions toward my sister?" "Rachel," Natalie's face burned, "to ask for her phone number and possibly her permission to take her to dinner." James didn't even blink at the interrogation. "Somewhere Tommy friendly for the first date because I can't leave him with a babysitter on school nights. Maybe that Italian place with the gelato bar he loves." "You're assuming I'll say yes to dinner," Natalie managed. "I'm hoping you'll say yes." James pulled out his phone. "But I'll understand if you need time to think about it. This has been an intense day." Sophie and David joined the growing circle, both grinning like they'd orchestrated the entire evening. "So," Sophie said casually, "should we start planning the next wedding?" "Sophie, we literally just danced once." "You dance like you'd been doing it your whole lives," David countered. "My cousin doesn't look at anyone the way he was looking at you. Trust me. I've known him since we were kids." That was significant. Victor materialized with champagne flutes for everyone, including grape juice for Tommy. A toast, he declared. 2 unexpected connections. 2 new beginnings. And to the photographer who finally stepped out from behind the camera. 2 new stories, Tommy added, raising his juice solemnly. Natalie looked around the circle of faces, Sophie and David radiant with newlywed joy, Rachel protective but supportive, Eleanor wise and welcoming, Tommy innocent and hopeful, and James, watching her with patient intensity, waiting for her decision. She thought about the past 2 years, the walls she'd built, the safety she'd found in observing life rather than participating in it, the comfortable numbness that came from no longer believing in happy endings. Then she thought about this morning, teaching Tommy about light and shadow, laughing at Victor's dramatic pronouncements, the unexpected ease of talking to James. Way dancing with him had felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before. Sunday dinner sounds lovely, she heard herself say. 5 o'clock? Should I bring anything? Eleanor beamed. Just yourself, dear, and maybe that beautiful smile. You've been hiding all day. James entered her number into his phone, his fingers fumbling slightly with nervousness. I'll text you the address. Fair warning. Tommy will probably interrogate you about everything from your favorite color to your opinions on dinosaurs versus robots. Dinosaurs, Natalie said immediately, specifically velociraptors. They're highly intelligent and hunt in packs. Tommy's eyes went wide with delight. Dad, she gets it. She understands the superiority of coordinated predators. I've created a monster, James muttered, but he was smiling. The real smile Tommy had mentioned earlier, the one that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. The DJ announced. The last dance of the evening. Couples drifted back to the floor for one final slow song. James extended his hand to Natalie, question in his eyes. One more dance? He asked. No pressure, no audience this time. Just us. Natalie took his hand, letting him lead her back to the floor. This time felt different from the first dance. Less performance, more genuine connection. They swayed together, while around them, other couples held each other close, celebrating love in all its forms. Thank you, James said quietly, for taking a chance on this. I know it's scary. Terrifying, Natalie agreed. But maybe that's how you know it matters. If it wasn't scary, it wouldn't be worth the risk. As the song ended and guests began gathering their belongings, preparing to depart, Natalie caught Sophie's eye across the room. Her best friend mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Natalie shook her head, mouthing back. For what? Sophie's response was simple but profound. For letting yourself be happy. Natalie woke to 17 text messages, 12 missed calls from Sophie, and a single photo that made her heart skip. The picture showed her and James on the dance floor, captured by one of the wedding guests. They were looking at each other with expressions so openly vulnerable that it hurt to see. The caption from an unknown number read, Evidence that fairy tales exist. Your friend Victor gave me your number. Hope that's okay. This moment deserved to be shared. She was still staring at the photo when her phone buzzed with a new message. This one from James. Good morning. Tommy woke me at 6 asking if Sunday was today yet. I explained calendar basics. He remains unconvinced. Hope he slept well. Natalie smiled despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, Good morning. Tell Tommy that Sunday comes after 4 more sleeps. Also, I'm nervous about this, which probably sounds ridiculous. His response came quickly. Not ridiculous at all. I'm terrified. I haven't been on a date since before Tommy was born. Currently Googling how to date as a widowed single father. Results are not encouraging. I'm Googling how to date someone with a kid when you know nothing about kids. Also discouraging. We could just wing it. Embrace the chaos. Spoken like a true parent. Sunday, 5 o'clock. My grandmother makes enough food to feed a small army. Be prepared. Natalie set down her phone and stared at her ceiling. What was she doing? She had spent 2 years building a perfectly functional life that didn't require risking her heart. Her business was thriving. Her apartment was exactly how she wanted it. She had successfully convinced herself that independence was better than vulnerability. Then one dance had demolished all those careful defenses. Rachel knocked on her bedroom door, entering without waiting for permission. You're overthinking. I can hear it from the hallway. I'm not overthinking. I'm thinking the appropriate amount. You've been staring at that photo for 20 minutes. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed. He's a good guy, Nat, you could see. It and how he was with his son. More importantly, you smiled more yesterday than you have in 2 years. What if it was just wedding magic? What if we have nothing in common outside of string lights and champagne? And you'll find out on Sunday. But you'll never know if you don't try. Rachel squeezed her hand. Michael broke something in you when he left. But maybe this James guy can help you remember that you're not actually broken, just healing. Sunday dinner and dinosaur debates. Sullivan House was a charming 2-story craftsman in a tree-lined neighborhood, where children rode bikes and neighbors waved from porches. Natalie parked her car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Through the front window, she could see movement inside. Warm light spilled onto the lawn, and the faint sound of laughter reached her ears. Before she could spiral into another round of second-guessing, the front door opened. Tommy burst out, Kate flying behind him, with James following at a more measured pace. "You came," Tommy announced, as if there had been any doubt.
I've been watching for your car for an
hour. Dad said I was being excessive, but I wanted to see you arrive. Excessive is an understatement. James wore jeans and a navy sweater that made his eyes even more striking. His hair was slightly damp, like he just showered. "We've been over the rules 3 times? No interrogating our guest, no showing her your entire action figure collection unless she asks, and absolutely no reenacting the velociraptor hunting scene from Jurassic Park at the dinner table." "Those are very specific rules," Natalie observed. Climbing out of her car with a bottle of wine she'd agonized over for 30 minutes at the store, based on previous dinner experiences with new people, James took the wine, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Thank you for this, for coming, and for not running away when my son started stalking your arrival from the window." "I wasn't stalking, I was observing, like Natalie does with her camera." Tommy grabbed her hand. "Come see my room. I've 17 dinosaurs and a whole book about velociraptors that Grandma Eleanor got me." "Tommy, let her breathe first." James tried to intervene, but Natalie waved him off. "It's fine. I'd love to see the dinosaur collection." Tommy's room was exactly what she expected, an explosion of toys, books, and artwork covering every surface. But what caught her attention was the wall of photographs. James and a beautiful woman with kind eyes, holding a tiny baby. The same woman, thinner now, her smile brave, despite obvious illness, cuddling a toddler Tommy. In one final image, James and Tommy at what looked like a beach, the space where the woman should have been achingly empty. "That's Mom," Tommy said matter-of-factly, following her gaze. She died when I was little. Dad says she loved me very much, but her body got too sick to stay." "She was beautiful," Natalie said softly. "You have her smile." Dad cries sometimes. When he looks at these pictures, he thinks I don't notice, but I do. Tommy pulled out a worn photo album. "Grandma Eleanor says it's okay to be sad about people we miss. That missing them means they mattered. Your grandmother is very wise." They spent 20 minutes looking at dinosaur books and action figures before Eleanor's voice called them down. For dinner, the dining room table was laden with homemade dishes, pot roast, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and a salad that looked like it came from a magazine. "This is incredible," Natalie said, taking her assigned seat between James and Tommy. "You didn't have to go to so much trouble." "Nonsense. I love cooking for people." Eleanor settled into her chair at the head of the table. "James tells me you're a photographer? That must be fascinating work." "It is. Though photographing weddings can be emotionally complicated." Natalie accepted the bowl of vegetables James passed her. "You spend all day documenting other people's happiness while wondering why your own love story didn't work out." The honesty surprised even her. But something about Eleanor's gentle expression invited truth. "My first engagement ended badly," Eleanor said calmly, serving herself pot roast. "Caught him with my sister 3 weeks before the wedding. Thought my life was over. Then I met James's grandfather at a church potluck 6 months later. He spilled punch on my dress, apologized for 20 minutes, and asked me to dinner to make up for it. We were married 47 years before he passed. Grandpa Henry was the best," Tommy chimed in through a mouthful of bread. "Dad says I'm named after him. Thomas Henry Sullivan." "Your grandfather would have loved you," Eleanor told Tommy, then looked at Natalie. "What I learned from that heartbreak is that the wrong person leaving makes room for the right person to arrive. But only if you're brave enough to let them in." James cleared his throat. "Grandma, maybe we should ease up on the life lessons during the first dinner." "Why?" "She's intelligent enough to handle honest conversation." Eleanor winked at Natalie. "Besides, I'm 83. I've earned the right to be direct." Dinner conversation flowed easily after that. Tommy dominated the discussion with elaborate theories about dinosaur intelligence and whether they could have been domesticated like dogs. James shared stories about his latest architectural project, a community center designed to be fully accessible. For people with disabilities, that's what I love about architecture, he explained, gesturing with his fork. The ability to create spaces that include everyone, not just able-bodied people. My best friend from college uses a wheelchair. I watched him struggle with supposedly public spaces that were actually designed to exclude him. Made me realize that design is political, whether we acknowledge it or not. That's how I feel about photography, Natalie said, warming to the topic. People think it's just about making things look pretty. But really, it's about deciding which stories get told, which moments get preserved. Every photograph I take is a choice about what matters. Their eyes met across the table, and that same electric connection from the dance floor sparked between them. Tommy noticed. Looking between them with a knowing smile that seemed far too mature for a 6-year-old after dinner, Lena recruited Tommy to help with dishes, leaving James and Natalie alone in the living room. Silence felt charged with possibility and nervousness. So James said finally, sitting beside her on the comfortable worn couch. How terrible was this on the scale of awkward first family dinners? Actually wonderful. Your grandmother is amazing, and Tommy as Natalie paused, searching for the right words. He's special. The way he talks about his mother with such honesty and acceptance, that's because of you, you know? You've given him permission to grieve, while still living.
Us.
Some days I feel like I'm failing him completely. James's voice dropped low. I burn dinner, forget about school projects until the night before, and have no idea how to explain why some kids have two parents while he only has one. But I'm trying. Every single day, I'm trying. That's what makes you a good father. It's not perfection, but presence. Natalie found herself reaching for his hand. Tommy knows he's loved. That's what matters most. James looked down at their joined hands. Can I be honest about something? Please. I haven't felt this way since my wife died. Actually, I'm not. Sure I ever felt exactly this way, even with her? He rushed to clarify. I loved Claire deeply. But what we had grew slowly over years of friendship first. This thing with you is different. Intense and immediate and frankly terrifying. I know what you mean. With Michael, it was practical. We made sense on paper. Same career goals, similar backgrounds. But there was no magic. No spark. I convinced myself that was mature love. Natalie laughed bitterly. Turns out, mature love means he could walk away easily when someone more convenient came along. His loss is my gain, James said simply. If he'd been the right person, you wouldn't have been at that wedding, wouldn't have taught my son about. Cameras wouldn't have danced with me, wouldn't be sitting here right now. 3 months of careful building the weeks that followed established a rhythm. James and Natalie moved slowly, carefully, both aware of the stakes involved. Their first official date was at the Italian restaurant Tommy loved. With the 6-year-old serving as enthusiastic chaperone, their second was a Saturday morning at the Children's Museum, where Natalie discovered she actually enjoyed explaining exhibits to curious kids. By the 3rd week, they'd established a routine. Thursday dinners at the Sullivan house, where Natalie taught Tommy photography basics while James cooked. Saturday adventures to parks, museums, or movies. Sunday evenings at Natalie's apartment, where they'd watch old films after Tommy went. To bed at Eleanor's house, Sophie called constantly for updates. Rachel appointed her self-official relationship advisor. Victor texted daily with unsolicited commentary about their epic love story in progress. But it was the small moments that mattered most. James bringing coffee to Natalie's studio when she worked late editing photos. Natalie showing up at Tommy's school play with flowers, 3 of them building elaborate Lego cities on Sunday afternoons. The way James's hand fit perfectly in hers. How Tommy started calling her Aunt Natalie without anyone suggesting. It one night, 2 months in. They sat on Natalie's couch, after Tommy had fallen asleep in her guest room during a movie marathon. I need to tell you something, James said, his voice serious. Tommy asked me yesterday if you were going to be his new mom. Natalie's breath caught. What did you say? I told him that grown-up relationships move slowly, that we're still figuring things out. James turned to face her fully. Out. But then he asked if I loved you. and I realized I didn't have an answer. Or rather, I had an answer, but I wasn't sure if it was too soon to say it. James, I love you, Natalie. I'm in love with you. And I know it's fast, and I know we're supposed to take things slow, but I'm tired of pretending this is casual. You're not casual to me. You're everything. Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. I love you too. And it terrifies me because the last time I loved someone, he destroyed me. But you're not him. You're patient and present and real. You see me? Not some version you want me to be. James kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Tommy's voice came from the hallway. Does this mean Natalie is staying forever? They both laughed, pulling the sleepy child into a hug between them. How long were you eavesdropping? James asked. Long enough to know you love each other. Grandma Eleanor said I should leave you alone to talk, but I wanted to make sure. Tommy yawned. So is she staying? Natalie and James looked at each other, an entire conversation happening in that glance. Yeah, buddy, James said softly. If she's staying, the perfect proposal 3 months after the wedding where they met, James planned a surprise. He contacted Sophie, who recruited Victor, who pulled in Rachel and Eleanor for a conspiracy that took 2 weeks to orchestrate. Natalie arrived at Riverside Manor thinking she was photographing another wedding. Instead, she found the ballroom transformed into something magical. Photographs covered every wall, images she'd taken over the past months. Tommy building Lego towers. James cooking dinner with flour on his nose. Eleanor laughing at a joke. The three of them at the beach, the zoo, the museum, an entire relationship documented in frozen moments. What is this? She whispered, lowering her camera bag. Tommy appeared in his cape, holding a single red rose. Dad says every princess needs a proper proposal story. James walked out from behind a column, wearing the same suit from Sophie's wedding. Music started, playing that same song they danced to. You once told me you gave up on fairy tales, James said, crossing to her. That you stopped believing in happy endings. But Natalie, you are my happy ending. You and Tommy are my everything. You took a broken man still grieving his wife, a confused kid missing his mom, and somehow made us whole again. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple ring box. I'm not asking you to replace Claire, to always be part of our story, part of who made me the man I am. But I'm asking if you'll write the next chapters with us. Will you marry me? Natalie couldn't speak through the tears. She nodded frantically, pulling James to his feet and kissing him while Tommy cheered and camera flashes went off from where Sophie, Rachel, Victor, and Eleanor were hiding. You ambushed me with a proposal, she accused when she could finally talk. I learned from Victor. Go big or go home. James slipped the ring onto her finger. Besides, you're the photographer. Someone else needed to document your story for once. Victor emerged with his camera. I got everything. The tears, the kiss, the pure cinematic perfection of this moment. Your wedding album is going to be legendary. Our wedding. Natalie looked at James. Eleanor and I were thinking next spring. Small ceremony, immediate family only. Tommy as ring bearer, obviously. James pulled her close. Unless you want something bigger? I want exactly that. Small, intimate, real. Natalie looked around at the photographs covering the walls. How did you get all these? I don't remember you taking pictures. Sophie helped. Every time you left your camera somewhere, we'd sneak candid shots. Turns out I'm pretty good with a camera myself. Had an excellent teacher. James pointed at one image in particular. Natalie teaching Tommy about lighting, both of them laughing, completely absorbed in the lesson. That's my favorite. The moment I knew for certain I was in love with you. Tommy launched himself at both of them, creating a group hug. Does this mean we're officially a family now? We've been a family for a while, buddy, Natalie said, kissing the top of his head. Now, it's just official. 6 months later, full. Circle the Small ceremony took place in Eleanor's garden on a perfect spring morning. 20 guests sat in white chairs among blooming roses. Tommy stood beside James in a miniature suit, the ring pillow clutched importantly in his hands. Rachel served as Natalie's only attendant, wearing a soft blue dress and crying before the ceremony even started. Victor, serving as both guest and unofficial photographer, provided running commentary in whispers that made everyone smile. Sophie and David sat in the front row, holding hands and looking remarkably smug about their role in this love story. But the most important guest was the one present only in spirit. James had placed a framed photograph of Claire on a chair next to Eleanor, acknowledging the woman whose love had taught him how to be a husband and father. Natalie had chosen the photo herself, wanting to honor the past while celebrating the future as she walked down the makeshift aisle toward James. Natalie thought about the journey that brought them here, the broken engagement that felt like the end of the world, the wedding where she'd been hired to photograph other people's happiness, the dance that changed everything, the slow, careful building of trust and love. James was crying when she reached him, unashamed of the tears streaming down his face. "You came," he whispered, echoing Tommy's words from that first Sunday dinner. "I came," she confirmed, "and I'm staying." The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, promising not perfection but presence, not to erase the past but to honor it while building something new. When the officiant pronounced them married, Tommy cheered so loudly that birds scattered from nearby trees at the small reception in Eleanor's dining room. Victor insisted on giving a toast. "I witnessed the beginning of this love story," he announced, champagne glass raised dramatically. Photographer who'd stopped believing in happy endings. An architect who thought his heart was permanently closed. One dance, one connection, one choice to be brave, and now look at you. Proof that sometimes the best stories are the ones we don't plan. 2 unplanned stories, Eleanor added, raising her own glass. And 2 having the courage to write new chapters. Later, as Natalie and James swayed together on Eleanor's patio to music drifting from inside, Tommy wedged himself between them. "Can I dance too?" he asked. They made room, the 3 of them moving together in their own rhythm, creating their own kind of magic. "Thank you," James said softly to Natalie over Tommy's head, "for seeing us, for choosing us, for believing we were worth the risk." "Thank you for teaching me that broken things can heal," Natalie responded. "That endings can become beginnings. That sometimes the person you're meant to find is standing right where you are, waiting for the same courage." Sophie appeared with her camera, capturing the moment, bride, groom, and child dancing in golden afternoon light, surrounded by flowers and family. The photograph would later sit on the mantel in their home, a reminder of the day to incomplete. Families became one whole one, as the sun set on their wedding day. Natalie thought about the girl who'd shown up at Riverside Manor 6 months earlier. It's the one who'd built walls to protect a wounded heart. The one who'd convinced herself that independence was safer than vulnerability. That girl would barely recognize the woman she'd become. This woman who laughed freely, who loved without reservation, who'd learned that the best stories aren't the ones we plan, but the ones we're brave enough to write. James was right about one thing. When one story ends, another waits to begin. You just have to be willing to turn the page, to dance even when you're scared. To believe that happy endings aren't just for fairy tales. Sometimes they're for photographers and architects and 6-year-olds and superhero capes. Sometimes they're for people broken by loss who find each other in the most unexpected places. Sometimes they're for anyone brave enough to say yes when love asks them to dance. The end.